Let's get to then winners, though, because I still think winners we can talk about in a positive manner. Who we liked and who we thought tested better than expectations. So, but I'll start with you. Who do you got some winners from the combine?
So Matthew Golden, I think clearly with his route running ability and how fast he ran, that's a big one. But I'm going to go with Isaiah Nayor. And this is a guy who, as a recruit, Nick, we had our eye on. He crushed it at Wyoming and transferred to Texas before the 2023 season. And he was actually getting a ton of hype as a dude who stood out for Texas. And on that Texas team, pretty importantly, were guys named A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. And he was getting hype, on par or even at times above those guys. Unfortunately, he gets hurt right before the season. Texas ends up being fine to make the national semifinal. And I think Isaiah just took a little bit too long to heal up. Like his stuff at Nebraska wasn't great this year, but 6'4 and a half, 218. He ran 4.40. It was like a 1.51 10-yard split. That's Mike. There's a chance that maybe he is just a slow healer, but that he is now closer to what he was when he was getting hype above an A.D. Mitchell, or obviously different type of player than a Worthy, but pretty similar skill set to a Mitchell when he was healthy.
And I do think for everyone that wants to say, the combine has no value, and if a guy runs this, whatever, you should have seen it on tape. Sometimes guys play hurt throughout the season. Yeah. Sometimes guys legitimately have injuries that are impacting how fast they are, how they look on tape. Sometimes guys are in roles that maybe don't even show their athleticism. So it still does matter. If a guy comes out and looks like a different athlete, it makes you question why. It makes you go back and revisit. And I do agree with Isaiah Nayor, only 455 yards this past year, but when you're 6'4", 220 pounds, and you run a 4.4 and jump the way he did, that gives teams a lot to think about.
If you go back and watch the Wyoming tape from 22, and you keep in mind how poor the quarterback play was for Wyoming that year, I think there's something there.
Yeah, and it was actually 21. So it was 4 years ago.
Right, okay,
878 yards and 12 touchdowns. So he was doing that, and I think young production matters at pretty much any position you're playing. If you're young and doing it, it's better than if you're old and doing it at the collegiate level and have that physical inbuilt advantage. All right, who else you got in the winners category?
Shamar Stewart. He's been a freak. The only question I have about him, and role has been moved around a lot. A&M used him as like a down lineman in a three-man front. I don't know that I loved him, but I don't know if I hated him in that stance. He does have a crazy wing and obviously has potential to bulk. We've seen him since high school. My only real question is the reactive quickness. He times really well on stuff where he's starting. What about when he has to react to the snap? Does he have that Terrell Suggs ability to get off the ball on time? But he's still. I remember in high school being young, and he's an early entrant, right?
Yes.
So he's got to be 21 years old.
He is.
Okay, then there's still a lot of upside.
Wingspan. 40-inch vertical, 267 pounds, 10'11" broad jump, 4.59 40. As explosive, I think, in terms of size explosiveness, the best since Myles Garrett. We saw the graphic when the defensive line were working out. Him and Landon Jackson are the only 260-plus pounders to jump over 40 inches since Myles Garrett and Mario Williams, 2 number 1 overall picks. So not bad company to be in if you're Shamar Stewart. And I think after that, this guy's going top 12 or so. That's what the NFL covets off the edge. That's what ends up winning. But I 100% agree with your points that he is much more when he has a directive, he can do it. If he has to react off of an offensive tackle, it more often than not did not look as pretty. So we shall see. Needs some development, but that's the whole point of this.
Right, exactly.
All right, who else you got?
I had Jahad Campbell.
Dude, everyone's winner. That guy after the combine that's what a first-round linebacker looks like.
I was a little surprised at how much off-ball stuff he played at Alabama. If you go back to how he was used at IMG Academy, they sent him a ton. He has some real blitz ability, and I thought just with that size, those testing numbers, he'll probably play a little bit heavier than I think he showed up at the combine. To me, I think he's the off-ball backer that I would really want in this class. Tyler Shuck is another dude who had a lot of injuries in college, but kept getting chances at major college, Power 5 programs. And I think we should read some signal into that this guy has ability that Texas Tech's giving him a shot. Oregon wanted him out of high school. Jeff Brom, who's a renowned quarterback coach, is that's the guy I want to go get. To me, there is some signal in guys being given chance after chance, and that signal is that he has real ability.
And I usually don't think usually quarterbacks don't look good, right? Usually it's not guys you're playing with. It's a different setting. He actually looked good. He was hitting guys. His go ball was great. So, Tyler Shuck, I agree, was a winner. Now, we touched on Bud's winners in the first segment. Let's get to mine from the NFL Draft Combine. He hit on Matthew Golden. To me, it's the first guy I can remember that usually when a guy runs in the 4.2s, you're like, yeah, that guy ran. We kind of know. Like, you can't hide 4.2 speed. I think Matthew Golden hit his 4.2 speed, man. I saw him get tracked down on tape numerous times. I had him projected like mid 4.4. So that time for him, insanely good. Obviously, and like, I think these guys can improve physically. Is one of the bigger takeaways is that, these guys, he's still a young guy coming out, a junior, and he improved a lot from sophomore to junior, transferring from Houston to Texas. And now the guy could just be ascending. So that 4.29, I think, stamps him in the first round. RJ Harvey, the UCF running back, running a 4.4 at 205 pounds, I loved. Armand Membu, testing like an absolute freak, running, in the high 4.8s at 330 pounds. CJ West going sub 5 seconds at 6'1", 316 pounds is an awesome time for a nose tackle. But I want to start with the secondary here, because you had Nick Manwari, the South Carolina safety. I had Nick Manwari. The guy jumped 43 inches, had over 11-foot broad jump, a 4.38 40, and oh, by the way, he's 6'3", 220. On tape, he wasn't like as dominant as most first-round safeties. You think someone's going to take him in the first round, though, after this?
I mean, do you want to be the guy who passes on that?
Probably not. No, I will say, though, there is a comp that is unfavorable for a guy that size with those testing numbers. It's Obi Melifonwu. I don't think he tests or plays anywhere near Obi Melifonwu did. Obi Melifonwu was a paper tiger. He did not like hitting. Nick Manwari is a little bit different. That guy likes to lay the boom.
There's a lot of safeties in this class who are thumpers.
Yes.
There's not as many good cover safeties, I don't think.
Agreed. It's him. I think Kevin Winston Jr., the Penn State safety, comes down and hits you. There are some great safeties to play like these too high coverages.
Makuba at Texas actually is a pretty big hitter.
Yes, and who will come down and fill those run lanes on the outside with violence, with quicks that can really be a value add to a lot of run defenses around the NFL. And the last guy I want to touch on here in my winners before we get to the flip side of the coin, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, because today is our tight end show. You came on to talk about tight ends. He was pretty much the only guy in this tight end class to really show out. We've been hyping it up. Well, a lot of the top guys didn't test. You didn't have Colson Leveland from Michigan test. You didn't have Tyler Warren from Penn State. You didn't have Elijah Arroyo from Miami. You didn't have Mason Taylor from LSU. But Terrence Ferguson from Oregon goes 4.63 with a 39-inch vertical and a 10.2 broad jump at 247 pounds, because there were questions about his size. How big was he actually going to be? To me, he's one of my favorite under-the-radar tight ends as like a receiver, what he can do.
He made himself some money with the drills that he did do. Let me ask you this. The other numbers from a lot of these tight ends were not overwhelming. Right?
Yes.
And as you mentioned, a lot of the top guys didn't test for various reasons. Like, do you think he stacks well in maybe last year's tight ends class or the year priors?
Let's think. Gosh, last year's tight end class, it was Brock Bowers, and then a pretty big gap. I think my tight end 2 in last year's class was Theo Johnson, Penn State tight end. He didn't go until day 3. Shaven Sanders was a lot of people's tight end 2. He didn't go until day 3. So I think these guys, I think there's like a handful of guys that very easily could have been tight end 2 in last year's class. And truthfully, I loved Gunnar Helm's tape as like how he plays the game. The testing, we'll talk about it here in a sec. The ankle injury, tough. Did it right before he ran his first 40, but still had a 30-inch vertical before that. So, yeah, I think Terrence Ferguson, I think I might have had him tight end 2 last year if he had come out.
Okay.
With that said, let's get to the flip side. Let's get to some of the combine disappointments. Who did you have on your list for guys that you wanted to see a little bit more from?
So I had Malaki Starks, a player who we've loved since he came out and going to Georgia in high school. And I thought if he had tested well, because his tape, for the most part, especially last year's tape, not this year's. I thought last year's tape was maybe a little bit better at times. I thought if he tested well, he had a chance to go like top half of the first round. But I just don't see NFL teams spending a pick like that on a player who is does have good instincts. Obviously, as I know we were talking during the commercial break, GPS stuff was really good during the positional drills. But if I'm spending a top half pick on a safety, I kind of need you to run really well, and he just didn't. And the agility stuff was poor as well. I had Tez Johnson. Now, he did have the shoulder injury, which may have impacted how some of his training for the 40. I think that happened in November. But running 4.51 at 154 pounds is not that's not going to get it done. And Will Campbell, his arms are basically what they were coming out of high school. Like we knew it, and we see a lot of these kids without pads on when they come to these elite camps. I remember him at the Future 50, And the previous year we had like an Amarius Mims and an Andrew Thomas and guys like that. And like Mike, the dudes who go like top half of the first round at tackle, they have a look at 17 that Will Campbell just doesn't have. Now, I think he's still a really damn good player. And if you got to kick him inside the guard, I get it. But having single-digit percentile hand and arm measurements are not a great indicator.
Well, I'll say this about Campbell. It's not just arm length and hand size. It is his frame. He has the short, if he steps foot on an NFL football field and plays offensive tackle, he will have the smallest wingspan of any offensive tackle in the NFL because he has tight shoulders, smaller arms, and that's how you get your hands on guys quickly on the edge. That's how you make up this space. Because when you get to the league, every edge rusher is like 6'5". They're 6'2" to 6'5", and they have 34-inch arms. Like it gets difficult. And I think you already saw him struggle with some of the better competition you saw on tape. So
Florida got him a little bit. I mean, if Shamar Stewart gets into his chest, he's waving in the air. They can't reach him.
So I think it's a real thing with him because I think the issues, sometimes guys are shorter armed and you never see it on tape. Sometimes guys are shorter armed and you see it already. And with Will Campbell, you saw it enough, in my opinion, that I'd be worried about it. So agree with that one. The Malaki Starks one, I'm going to have to push back because there are two parts to the combine. There is the athletic testing, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not what you want from a first-round safety. 4.5 40, and especially like 33-inch vertical. All his numbers were bad. 7.2 6.3 cone, 4.45 short shuttle. Those are obscenely bad numbers. But the GPS numbers from the Next Gen Stats on the field during the position drills, he had the top speed in not just one drill, every single drill they did. The guy is capable of playing at a speed that just doesn't apparently show up in the testing, but like on the field, I watched this guy play and I'm just like, throw it all out. Throw it all out. So it reminds me a little bit of Kyle Hamilton's testing. Now, it wasn't this bad from like the cone or shuttle, but Kyle Hamilton ran 4.61.
Yeah.
If you watch Kyle Hamilton on tape, at no point would you ever be like that 4.61 guy. And so if it's on tape, doesn't look that way, I am not too worried about it. My disappointing guys, I had Gunnar Helm, and it's even before the 40. He had a 30-inch vertical. He did that with a fully healthy ankle.
Yeah.
30-inch vertical is a bad number for an offensive lineman. A top-tier offensive lineman. A horrible number for a tight end that you're asking to be like a red zone threat the way he is. I thought Tyler Booker quietly was one of the poorer performers here. His relative athletic score, if you've never heard of that, it's Math Bomb. It takes all sort of his athletic testing into account. His relative athletic score was 41st percentile for interior offensive linemen. And if there is a position where traits don't matter as much, it is interior offensive line. We ran the numbers back in the day at PFF. We did the studies on certain positions. Edge, it matters a lot. Guard, it does not matter a ton. Center, it actually matters the least. So the closer you are in interior offensive line, it doesn't matter as much. But are you still going to go to bat? Because we're hearing like top 15 hype for Tyler Booker, the Alabama guard. You go into a bat for a guy who's a 41st percentile athlete, and he didn't come in like 340. He came in 321, pretty standard size for an NFL guard nowadays, and had only two measurables that were even above 50th percentile, no measurables above 60th percentile compared to other offensive guards. That's tough, man.
And like I've seen Tyler a lot. So he was a New York or Jersey kid, transferred down to Florida. If you talk to guys at IMG, like they still hold him up as a dude who like busts his butt as far as work ethic, which is good and bad. It's good because I think you're getting a guy with like a really professional approach, and if he stays healthy, I'd be surprised if he's not like a second contract guy. The flip side of that is, I mean, you got to figure he worked really hard at all this testing numbers, and this is still what you got. Yeah. So he does, to me, profiles as a guy who we knew about early in high school. He probably is closer to maxed out than some of these guys who maybe have not had great training. So it's kind of what you see is what you get. You need to evaluate what you have, not maybe what you could have with Tyler Booker. I still think he's a good player. Top 15, though, like you have to bet on the upside. What is the upside of taking Booker?
I still think you'd be a good pass protector. I just think if you're running outside zone, you run, you get your guards on the move at all in any way, shape, or form, any stretch stuff, and it's like, he's not fit for that scheme whatsoever. Last guy I'll highlight, one of the edge rushers, because edge rusher, when we did do the studies, that was the position where it matters the most. You want athletes off the edge, and it's Princely Manuelin, the Ole Miss edge rusher, transfer from Florida. Not only did he come in 18 pounds lighter than he played at the Senior Bowl, which 18 pounds in a month.
That's like a tapeworm.
Yeah, the guy was on some sort of Ozempic in the meantime. He ran slow, 4.72. The jumps were good, But then his change of direction is 7.333 cone, 4.46. If you're an undersized guy, 244 pounds is undersized off the edge in today's NFL. You better be a freak athlete. Those are not freak athlete numbers. And the way he plays on tape is a guy who wants to out-athlete offensive tackles. He's not engaging, trying to overpower. He doesn't have a ton of moves at his disposal. He likes to run around offensive tackles. Well, you can do that in the NFL if you run a 4.4 something. You can't do that in the NFL if you run a 4.72.
And I don't know that his habits are Tyler Booker-esque. So, again,
Tyler Booker's not running at fans after the game, after a loss?
Probably not. I don't like. There's the good and bad. Again, like maybe there's more upside if you get the guy. Practice habits and training habits are a little bit improved, but also the concern that, hey, like, you need to show up ready for the combine, and those weren't great numbers.